who's governing these agreements? Is this a common law thing? But we're talking about independent artists who aren't hiring attorneys. What do we say about this? Like, how does that work?
You think you just asked a slowball question. There's a lot of interesting questions that you just asked in one. It's a very challenging thing to navigate. And I see independent artists more pulling contracts when it's like, oh, I need a quick work for hire. And they might pull something online that, is, in a completely different state and doesn't have, all of the same rules. And then if they're in California, you have labor law issues overlapping with work for hire that you have to worry about. So there's always the jurisdictional issue. In the metaverse, we were talking about the universe. And so, you can define a jurisdiction that you want to guide the laws in a contract, but you have to have some understanding of what that means. So if people are just pulling stuff off, and it's from the District of Columbia, or it might be from another country. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of stuff from the UK that pops up when you're just Google searching for a contract.
Hello and welcome to this episode of The Vana Room. We have a super, super special guest with us today. She is a powerhouse music attorney that we are honored to have on the show to discuss lots of cool stuff. And before we jump in, I want to read Christianne's bio because there's no way I was able to memorize this. So Christianne Kinney represents a diverse array of artists, celebrities, intellectual property owners, and tech companies in the entertainment space. Clients include Oscar-winning composers, multi-platinum selling and Grammy award-winning recording artists, songwriters, producers, and their estates, merchandise and live production companies, published authors, award-winning filmmakers, professional athletes, social media influencers, and tech startups.
That's my way of not name dropping.
Yes, I would say, who are these clients?
I have big clients and none of your business.
Yeah, exactly. There's the big wigs.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's the big wigs, and then there's the ones that are none of your business.
Yeah.
She was recently selected as one of Billboard's top music attorneys. Congratulations. And one of the top women attorneys in Los Angeles by the Los Angeles Business Journal. Kinney is a certified NFT expert through Blockchain Council. Kinney has also recognized by Time Well Spent, yes. She has also been recognized by Super Lawyers magazine and has been featured in Glamour magazine's Women of the Year issue for her charity work in bringing music and art programs to at-risk youth, which is another amazing thing that you do.
Kudos.
So, Christianne Kinney, thank you so much for joining us on today's show. We are so humbled to speak with you. So, Monique, I know this is kind of, you love the legal stuff. I do too. Monique is actually in her master's program for legal studies.
Very cool.
So this is all probably really fun stuff to chat with attorneys and learn all that stuff.
Yes, I am. I'm salivating for this conversation for sure. And I also want to remind our listeners and our viewers that this particular episode goes along with our contract series that we started this season. In this particular episode, we are definitely, obviously, as Christianne is an attorney, going to be touching on the contract aspects that take place in these new spaces that we are looking at doing business in. So, I'm super excited for this conversation, as I know Lennon is, because we've been talking about it for weeks. So I feel like I need your autograph. We are so excited.
Man, I hope I can live up to the hype.
And also as a reminder too, that this is the small disclaimer that this is not legal advice. This is strictly for educational purposes only. If you have specific legal questions, we highly, highly recommend you reach out to an attorney.
And just because you listen to the podcast does not form an attorney-client relationship between us.
Yes. That part. Cool. So, Christianne, how are you doing? How's everything going?
Things are going really well. It was a strange time the last few years. It's been kind of a time to flourish in the Web3 space. I mean, there's been so much experimentation around how to fill gaps when touring income went away, when nobody could tour, when nobody was really going in the studio anymore, there was just this space to create. And there were plenty of people that just sank and weren't sure what to do. And there were plenty of innovative artists that were like, well, what can we do? What do we want to create and build? And we saw the flux of NFTs to their height, to their low level. I'm not playing in that space so much right now. We kind of saw the writing on the walls with NFTs as far as litigation that was sure to come about. And now we're really seeing that hit hard. My initial, my initiation into Web3 was really in the Metaverse, and or more so in virtual reality, if you want to call that. We can get into debates about whether the Metaverse exists and what that is and all of that, but getting into VR for Burning Man. So there were some friends that were creating a virtual reality Burning Man and licensing rights from Burning Man project, and then getting all of the digital art incorporated into the space, building the playa, wanting people to come in and build their own camps, and just like they would at Burning Man when the event was shut down. And then from there, how do you monitor camps? I mean, all of a sudden, we were in this universe where, you want to say it's a one-to-one as far as, oh, well, we can't have live events, so we'll have them in VR. But all of a sudden, all of these licensing issues arise, in the music law space, from the fact that while there's eye candy at a normal event too, of course, now all of a sudden there's technology involved and you're synchronizing it with things. And so do you have to have sync licenses, which are negotiable with people? Do you have to have mechanical rights license because things are being, recorded, or maybe they're being streamed, or maybe it's just literally live, are there things being recorded in VR? We had VR headsets, and with AltSpace, which is no more, it died a few weeks ago, but AltSpace was Microsoft's platform. And they have the mechanism where in your Oculus, you can take pictures, you can take selfies, and you can record some stuff. And so, you had to be very, very careful because then you have this archival piece of art that's existing. So, that first year, there was just a land field, just tons of issues that could have come up. I told them, I was like, we're not doing any music on the playa. I don't care. We don't have time. Let's get the art in there. If people put it in their camp, we'll take it down, just can't. And in that first year, it was a slow grow and just trying to create something cool with community. So, that was my initiation into it, and I was hooked and just loved, I guess, not only the creativity that goes behind contracts. You get a lot of music contracts where they're very cookie cutter. I've talked to many attorneys that have told me, like, oh, I knew that this clause went in there well before I knew what it meant. So some contract attorneys will learn, oh, well, this is where you put the language, blah, 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 blah. But they don't know why. And so, to be able to be creative and innovative and think about things, I came from a litigation background before I did transactional law. And so I was always issue spotting and figuring out, how is this contract going to screw us over? I saw things go south very quickly. And so I could navigate that pretty well because I saw the mistakes that happened and all the lawsuits that could arise from that. So, anyway, I'm talking without direction, but it's an interesting area.
That is fantastic. So I want to ask you, since you sort of brought it up, when we talk about doing business in the metaverse, and so there is no specific order to my questions. I'm just kind of, as they come to me. For maybe a decade, could be longer, there's been a sentence in the clause of the contract as far as how far the protection, I guess, would go. So basically, there would be a clause that says, in any media now known or hereafter devised throughout the universe.
Yes.
Right?
Perpetuity.
In
all of
perpetuity.
our fancy lingo, yes.
So does in any media now known or hereafter devised and throughout the universe already incorporate the metaverse, or does something else need to be added to secure protection or use in that space?
It's a great question. So I would say that it does really incorporate the metaverse. There are aspects of name and likeness rights where I like to tie in avatars and different things, even though those people don't really necessarily own their avatar because they're using tools that other people create. It is a likeness, but why not hit it over the head? It's more that these contracts evolve from a licensing standpoint. So there's all kinds of protections under the Copyright Act that get triggered when you're in the metaverse, and you want to protect and make sure that you're checking all of those boxes and not leaving anything to chance. So that's more of the nuance. Also letting people know, I mean, we were very straightforward with the digital rights artists. So, we would just tell them there's the ability for third-party users to film, to record, to take selfies and snaps with your pictures. And we would like in our terms of use, to give them the right to use those for personal use only. But if they use it for commercial use, A, we're not going to be liable for it. B, you can go after them because that's a restriction in our terms of use. So, we wanted everybody to know the mechanisms involved between Oculus headsets, the platform we were on, all of that, and how you engage in this space. And yeah, a number of rights were triggered that, you don't always think about and aren't going to appear in every average music contract. So I still love the catch-all, any medium now or here and after devised, because technology is going so quickly. Now we have AI, and, I've been deep diving in that. And that is just a whole other interesting can of worms. But
I've been digging
yeah,
that
I mean,
too.
it's a great catch-all, always has been. So
a lot of so I'm going to pull it back a little bit. If I'm a new artist and I want to explore this space as a revenue stream, I don't have or I may not have the funds to hire someone like you. My guess is many of these new people are creating their own contracts for operation in this space, which can be very dangerous, as we know. They're pulling stuff off the internet to use boilerplates and whatnot.
Or chat
what is
GPS. Speaking of
AI. Okay, Lennon.
I actually
no, you didn't.
I haven't used that to do contracts. I did use it to draft some questions. I use it to help inspire some questions. So some of the questions are
and I think
inspired.
AI is kind of working as a tool, but we can talk about that in a bit if you guys are interested.
Yes,
I find
would
it
love
fascinating.
to. Would love to. Yes.
So for people entering into metaverse and NFT space, I guess my first question to you is, can you explain what type of contract this is? In other words, is this considered an e-contract that they're dealing with, right? And then who's governing these agreements? Is this a common law thing? Is this an internet, is this, so I was just learning about CISG versus UCC. And so I know that because I'm studying it, but we're talking about independent artists who aren't hiring attorneys. What do we say about this? How does that work?
I mean, you think you just asked a snowball question. There's a lot of interesting questions that you just asked in one. It's a very challenging thing to navigate. And, I see independent artists more pulling contracts when it's like, oh, I need a quick work for hire. And they might pull something online that, is, in a completely different state and doesn't have, all of the same rules. And then if they're in California, you have labor law issues overlapping with work for hire that you have to worry about. So there's always the jurisdictional issue. In the metaverse, we were talking about the universe. And so, you can define a jurisdiction that you want to guide the laws in a contract. But, you have to have some understanding of what that means. So if people are just pulling stuff off, and it's from the District of Columbia, or it might be from another country. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of stuff from the UK that pops up when you're just Google searching for a contract. It can be incredibly dangerous, and you might not be getting all of the rights that you need. I would say it's difficult to play in the metaverse space when you don't have a lot of money anyway, because if you're having somebody build something cool for a music video, I mean, there's an immense amount of money that's going into those builds too. NFT space, I think I've seen more of the experimentation because there were so many platforms that were cropping up. But then the problem there became people really didn't understand what they could upload, and you were having IP issues and violations where people thought, oh, well, maybe if I make this really cool thing that incorporates someone else's trademark or, modifies a photo that already exists, then I can make this really cool GIF. And they're creating a derivative work unintentionally and uploading it to the space. So these were consistent problems you were seeing with people that are just trying to jump into a space that sounds like on the surface there's a lot of money and opportunity there. But if you don't navigate it very carefully, then it can cost you more money in the long run. So it's not a place to really play without a lot of thought and somebody, whether it's a manager, just somebody watching your back that knows what they're doing and can say, yeah, no, we can't do that. That's not yours, or this is going to be a problem. But yeah, it's fascinating when people deep dive into things where they probably shouldn't. And this is a complicated area where I would say a lot of music attorneys, are sometimes lost in this space. That's why you saw so many panels. I mean, I stopped doing them after a while. There were so many Web3 panels. And I'm like, okay, well, they've heard from me, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's fascinating. And there's things that people need to think about. I've had conversations with other people that were, doing that Web3 circuit and speak often about it, where people were just telling her, well, we don't need a sync license for that, or, oh, we don't need to worry about that because it's the metaverse and, it's kind of Wild West, like podcasts where I'm like, there's a lot to unpack in that, in that whole statement, rights are rights. I mean, it's true for a long time, when podcasts were first popping up, that was a space where people were like, oh, well, nobody's monitoring us, so I guess we can do all this stuff. It doesn't mean that. It just meant nobody was really monitoring it for a bit. But they come out of the woodwork. You saw it with NFTs. There were issues about whether those were securities. Didn't mean that the SEC was monitoring it initially, but when millions and millions and millions of dollars are passing through for a fad or whatever you want to call it, people start paying attention. So,
do you anticipate an organization being created of legal professionals just to monitor or, kind of the way that the MLC was created to, handle mechanical licenses? Do you anticipate, as more people are moving in the metaverse and NFT space, that an organization may need to be created made up of tech and legal professionals to oversee that space?
I would love it. I don't see it being a reality, at least for many, many, many years, if that was going to happen. But what you are seeing is small companies cropping up that have, a collection of rights where it can be a one-stop shop for tech companies that want to get into this space. They can't, really play with the big boys yet because they have no negotiation power, and that can take a very, very long time, as we all know, to deal with labels and publishing companies and try and secure rights to everything under the sun. So instead you get these, smaller shops that are clearing rights for you so that you can at least start something, start and build something properly, not a mea culpa, ask permission later type approach, which
So much of that.
backfires
Yeah.
every time.
Yeah. So you mentioned before that you have a lot of clients that sometimes take those copy pasted things. So when somebody comes to you and they have signed one of these agreements and it's in a different jurisdiction, there's things that, and they're like, what did I sign? I'm so dumb. What can I do? What is kind of your advice in that situation?
Uh,
Is there
classic
anything you
attorney
can do?
advice of it depends.
Yeah.
I mean, it really does. It's always difficult to answer those broad brush, because when you sign anything, you're guided by the terms of what you signed, and it could be a jurisdictional issue where maybe the laws are different in the jurisdiction you signed in than what you understood. And there's so many factors, and this comes up all the time, literally all the time, where even very savvy clients of mine have signed something that they did quickly or did without passing it on to me because somebody needed it desperately, or right away. And one of the things that I would like to convey to listeners, because this comes up a lot too, if anybody's pressuring you to sign something right away, that is nonsense. That is such a red flag. It's not how business is done. Never. Business people understand. I have so many clients, or younger clients, younger artists that are like, I don't want to push back. I don't want to give them too much, like we don't want to redline this too much because I don't want to lose the opportunity. That's crazy. I mean, everybody that's professional and in business understands that these are things that are negotiated on both sides, and there's going to be things that they don't do and things they do. But yeah, at the end of the day, you should never feel pressured. I get a lot of those December 28 calls, so if I'm on holiday, for Christmas, I'll get clients or, friends that'll call me and say, hey, I have to sign this contract before the end of the year or it's going to go away. Is there any chance that you can look at it? I'm like, I'll look at it when I get back. But if anybody's pressuring you to sign it before the end of the year, that is nonsense. Like, they know every music attorney is on vacation right now.
Yeah.
We all take off December.
Everybody is on vacation.
Yep.
And
the whole music industry shuts down in December.
Yeah, they're just monkeying with you. So,
yeah. What is the biggest challenge that you're seeing for? I mean, I understand your clients are at a much more successful level than a lot of the people that may be watching this particular podcast. Because a lot of our viewers are people who are coming into the music industry or have been in the industry for a while and maybe want to try to dabble in this space.
Right.
What is the biggest, and maybe you touched on this already, but I'm just curious, like, what is the biggest mistake you are seeing people make entering into the Web3 space?
Not having contracts, doing things very Wild West style, where they're just kind of entering it with a buddy who can, build something in Unity or whatever, and, not paying attention at all to IP issues. I mean, those are dangerous areas. And just so you know, I mean, I actually came from, being an independent artist. And one of the first things I did as a music attorney was I wrote a legal blog, kind of like a Dear Abby column for independent artists to help educate them on, I mean, just from the most basic of, why did this music video get taken down? That was maybe one of my most popular blogs. Was someone asked, why did my music video get taken down? Because I got a mechanical license from Harry Fox, and I did this as a cover, and then the video got taken down. I'm like, oh, well, let me explain licensing to you, and I broke it down every single piece by piece, and it kind of resonated. So I like educating independent artists, because there's so much that you can do in this space that you should understand. I mean, unfortunately, the deal with independence is that you have to wear all of the hats. You have to be a business professional, and you have to make smart choices. And that means that when you need them, you need to get the contracts, otherwise it's going to be devastatingly more expensive to fix it on the back end. And I see it less in the Web3 space with the independent artists, but more just the day-to-day stuff, bringing musicians into a studio and not having them sign a work made for hire agreement, or trying to get everybody to sign work for hire agreements after the fact, which happens a lot. Like, oh, I didn't get everybody. Well, you can get it signed afterwards, but it's going to be that transfer and assignment language that kicks in and not the work for hire, because that has to be signed beforehand, before the work is done. So there's all these basic principles that are built into copyright law that people would just, how complicated it is. That is not fun for an artist to dive into. They should have the opportunity to be creative and to focus on that. But as an independent artist, you get to do everything, and you get to read boring legal blogs and listen to podcasts and try and, get all of this information. It can be absolutely overwhelming for an artist to try and do that and try to be creative at the same time. So, I think one of the biggest pieces of advice I would have for the independent artists or people that are getting into this area is budget accordingly. Don't be afraid to hire an attorney to make sure that before you're entering the studio or before you're doing anything major, to create something, that you're protecting the brand that you're about to build, that you're protecting yourself, your interests, your rights, that you're not having somebody record an entire album for you without an agreement in place, thinking they're a sound engineer. And then they're like, I'm a producer and I own half of this, half of the songs and the master. This comes up all the time. People don't understand, the role of a producer, or they misinterpret what somebody is doing for them in the studio. And everybody thinks that their role was more important than the other person does. And, misunderstandings happen. So get that stuff flat before you go in. It's so much easier.
Mm-hmm. I want to transition a little bit into AI. I think that's an interesting topic, and I know you mentioned it earlier. One thing that I've been following very closely is the copyright board's rulings recently and statements on like AI generated art. And a friend of ours who's been on the podcast, Davey, has explained that this is likely to go to the Supreme Court to make a final decision. What are your thoughts on this, and why? I mean, the ruling is kind of, the AI generated arts are not copyrightable because they don't count as a human authorship. Right. Well, what is human authorship? What does the law define as human authorship? So can you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for people that haven't deep dove into any of this area, essentially the Copyright Office has declared that, anything that is going to have copyright protection needs to be created by a human. And they have this whole long addendum, talking about this. And it goes back to even, the monkey selfie, that was in the media a few years back, that the monkey couldn't own a copyright either. So they want this human tangible element. I mean, the copyright laws are built to protect new and innovative ideas and creativity, but not from a computer that is really generating things that are derivative in nature. I mean, to me, the real danger of AI is that it's drawing from what's out there already, so it's in the style of, we already saw that backfire in the Blurred Lines case, right? So I think there's a real danger in the Copyright Office just rubber stamping all AI works as protectable. Now, we saw the comic book case, that's the only one that I know of where the Copyright Office has said, okay, we'll allow this registration. And in that situation, somebody wrote out an entire comic book story. They used the artwork that was generated by AI, but then they had, input as to the layout and things. So there was human involvement in its creation, and I haven't seen that registration, but I'm sure that the AI generated art was excluded. from what it was copyright protectable, because that's just how they would operate. So to me, AI is a little scary. And I say that representing creators and seeing a lot of clients that want to explore AI more and want to utilize these tools, kind of like you were talking about, Lennon, to help enhance, or speed up things, as a tool. You can look at, beautiful cameras and lenses as a tool. For Christ's sake, we can take so many beautiful pictures on our iPhones now, or Samsung, or whoever you like, But I'm an iPhone girl. I have the new camera, and it takes beautiful, beautiful pictures. And I'm not manipulating settings. I'm not doing it's kind of a button push. I still own that picture, but that's a very elaborate tool that we're using. Once you start getting into AI, I think the real exploration here is it a tool like that, or is it something that is self-generating? And you get these programmers that are putting in very detailed information. You had the Seinfeld spoof, that they were programming in detail how to generate a sitcom basically 24/7. And that backfired, but I was on a different
server. That's the thing that I guess I'll play devil's advocate, because to what you're saying, we could argue the same thing for keyboards. Like,
I know
the sound's already programmed into the keyboard, yet if I compose something on that keyboard, I'm still using something that was already put in there to create those. So I'm not seeing the difference. I see the difference, but I don't see the difference, because all you're telling the AI to do it versus you pressing the button. But what's the difference between that and me speaking into my phone and telling my phone what my lyrics are going to be for the song, and then the little words show up? You know what I mean?
I absolutely know what you mean.
I think it's splitting hairs to the point where I think it's going to get overturned for that very reason.
I think it won't.
I think so.
I think it has gone a little past tool. I think that you can argue, and I'm one of those people too, where I kind of hate all of the music that's generated, by button pushing and just electronic sounds that are already all of my drummers have had the same bumper sticker on their van, that drum machines have no soul. We've seen this evolution for years and years and years.
Feelings are hurt right now.
I know. Every time there's new technology, you have a little bit of pushback on the creative side, because what does this mean for humanity? AI, I feel, is a bit more dangerous, and that's just a personal opinion about it. But I've seen it start going awry a little bit in its beta forms, and it was very interesting when that photo app, was it Lensa or something, that everybody was complaining about, because it was, some of the images that it was self-generating included artist signatures from other photos and stuff. And so you really have this risk of derivative creation, which is the author's right, so artists are not getting compensated for that. And, how far does that go? So it's a compelling, interesting argument that I could talk about all day, but I won't. But yeah, I think that's interesting. The other thing I found interesting with Lensa was a lot of women were coming back and saying, why am I half naked in all of these pictures? That was like a real thing, that all of these were very over-sexualized photographs of women. And the sad reality with AI is that's what's on the internet. That is what it's drawing from, is us, the everything forever. Why did it do a transphobic bit through AI generated content? Because there's fucking horrible people online that say that shit, So
absolutely. I think that I read something too when Lensa was being had that thing, was the data that it was collecting on your face, like it was collecting like biometric data, and I'm like, I'm never gonna use that, no thanks. Yeah, I don't need my biometric data being sent off to this Facebook application. Like, no thanks. I think going back to AI, I always kind of push the argument of 30 years ago, before computers and Pro Tools really had a footing, we were recording analog to tape.
Right.
And then when computers kind of came up, it's like you had digital audio workstations like Pro Tools and Logic and all those popping up, where you could record up to 100 or 500 tracks right in your computer. You no longer needed the analog board.
Yeah.
You had VST instruments that could do piano, any instrument you ever wanted, any sound you could ever create was right there. So you could argue that computers and these digital audio workstations are similar to AI as a very strong tool. But at the same time, we're at a point in the industry where electronic music just doesn't have the soul that jazz music does, because you can't sequence music into Logic as well as you can have a humanized, classically trained jazz saxophonist or guitarist performing. You're just not going to get that feel.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where we're going to be with AI in 3 to 5 years. AI is going to be closer and closer and closer. At least now, absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's a risk that we get there and all of a sudden, we're all worrying about, it replacing the jobs of creative people, which always felt like there was a little bit of job security in creating unique art. And all of a sudden, I think the digital artists are the first ones to be nervous about AI, a bit. And it is going to be a long conversation about what's fair, what's right. Is this just another tool that technology is providing people that can be utilized, or is it something very different?
But don't you think intellectual property law will help? Assuming the courts stand by their decision, then that actually ends up, in my opinion, giving those creators more value, because if the law is going to say your use of your use of AI, that you can't own that, then that's the whole point of creating the IP in the first place. So you have something that you can own, that you can monetize from. So if the law is going to say I can't own the AI generated content, I'd rather hire somebody, create it, transfer the rights over to me, and now I can you know what I mean?
I totally agree.
I think that might end up being the saving grace for creators.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I've had a lot of clients that are like, hey, we're doing some cool, things on merch with AI art. I'm like, well, there's nothing really for me to do with that right now. Like, we could do X, we could do Y, we could do Z, but here's how I think that's going to play out, and so, exploring all of these things right now, it's an interesting, weird area to navigate, but I agree. I think if that sticks, and if it's not going to be copyright protectable, if you can't trademark an image that's AI generated, if all of these, schools of thought for IP protection in general are all on the same page with AI. And you've seen other countries doing different things, by the way. But at least for the States, if we stick with that, then I would recommend to companies, are you sure you want to sell merch that has this really cool thing? Because nobody owns that. Anybody can use it. It's basically like public domain that you just gave away. So
how does that work for the record label? So I guess there's 2 questions. One, you have record companies that had created AI generated artists that were performing, I'm assuming, AI generated songs.
Right.
So why bother? If you can't own your recordings and your musical work because it was all created by this, software. Then you have, it's so weird. I feel like I'm talking about 2 different, what was the thing with Superman? What was the other world? The Bizarro world. That's
Bizarro.
I feel like we have regular world and Bizarro world. That's in my mind. That's how the metaverse and all this looks to me. So then we have real life existing record labels that are like, okay, we're going to go in the metaverse and do this, or we're going to create AI and put it in the metaverse and do this. How are those contracts going to be different? Like, if I draft a contract in the real world, and then move that thing into the metaverse, what needs to be added to the contract?
Right. With the incorporation of AI, maybe nothing. I mean, maybe a clarification that certain artwork is, generated by computers and is considered artificial intelligence that is not copyright protectable, and this will be treated as blah. Like, I haven't had to deal with that interception exactly in the metaverse yet, although, I mean, there were certainly things that were within the metaverse, like the avatars, that would be, more of a toolbox that AltSpace provided. AltSpace owns all of that. They don't own their avatar. So sometimes you just spell out, all right, well, you don't own your avatar. That's usually dealt with in the terms of use for whatever platform is providing a tool to somebody. So there's not much more you have to do. With some of the AI apps, tools, different platforms that people are utilizing, there is language about who owns IP. And is it nonsense? Is it everybody just trying to, use the same lingo that has been used for all time because they don't know how it's going to go? I think that is what's happening. So, this is the latest exploration of technology that we can't quite keep up with from a legal standpoint. And everybody always says, the law can't keep up. The law can't keep up. We definitely are able to, draft around these things always, but there's a reality that, should there be a body that is just looking over the metaverse, or just looking over AI, or just looking over these more distinct technologies, rather than the same groups of people that have been dealing with something on a very different level for years and years and might not fully understand or care about the distinctions of technology and what they offer. So, I think that's where we could really stand to grow.
I thought I heard, I don't know if it was in the US or if it was another country that was talking about creating like some kind of oversight ethics board. But my concern is with the political climate in the States specifically, is a lot of these congressmen and senators and senator women, they don't have a grasp on technology. And like, I don't think somebody who's 90 years old should be having a say in, especially these old white men who have never left their hometown, shouldn't have much of a say on this. We need people who actually know what they're doing.
On people.
No, they don't.
That's not fair, guys. No. They're on their computers late at night trying to pick people up.
I love you, Christianne. I love you. Oh my gosh. I can't wait till this is over for the conversation after. But and they're talking to their grandkids going, how do I save this?
Yeah.
How do I take a screenshot?
How do I delete this?
You're the one creating the laws. Oh my gosh.
I have to write a law that's going to affect 315 million people. Grandson, how do I do this?
Yep.
Yeah, that's the scary part. We need people that are
thing.
We need people that are confident. Yeah, and that scares me. I think we need oversight and I think hopefully we get to a point where it would be separate from the federal government and would be kind of this ethics board that could oversee this stuff, because I don't have much faith in the government right now. So
but it would have to be a federal created agency.
Because copyright law
otherwise you got to leave it up to the states, and then we come right back to the same problem. I think you bring it right back to the same problem.
Yeah. And then, you're still going to have other countries that are doing their thing. But I mean, I think people follow, what the United States does, and that it would be a very good idea for us to have people that are well-versed in technology making decisions that make sense and applying laws in the way that they make sense and making something a bit more streamlined for tech companies so that there's a win-win. Yep.
So are the I feel like I'm about to answer my own question, but
good.
When
Less
you
for me to do.
have business, when you have a business in the metaverse,
yes,
is that a product or is it a service?
Like, great question.
It's not actually tangible. So what is it?
Well, if it's a platform, then I suppose it's more of a service based. There are things that might be more product based. I would say it errs on the side of service. Most of the companies that I'm seeing, sometimes it's just a brand. I think that most of the companies that you're seeing in the metaverse have a companion counterpart outside of the metaverse. The
Okay, I see what
the
you're saying.
the clients that I had,
I got you.
essentially doing
Mhm.
event production, but on a very high level.
Sure.
And so they'd be event producers,
Mhm.
but it just is the nuance of how you do that job in a different space where there's other IP concerns, other licensing rights, when you're incorporating IP into that space versus at a normal event. Um,
Mhm.
it's some public performance or something that's not being filmed where
Mhm.
you can just, people are just there live to see it. That's pretty simple, on its face from a licensing standpoint. But you you start going into the metaverse and all of a sudden it's like every single license that you could possibly get, you're going to need to get.
Mhm.
It gets a bit crazy.
Mhm.
Especially if the technology is going to allow you to record, because I feel like we come back to
Yeah.
the Betamax case of, okay, well, why are you recording in the
Right.
metaverse? Like, I don't think the technology. Okay, now I sound like an old person. Um,
You should join
'cause,
Congress.
well,
Yeah,
thanks.
to run for
No, I'm
Congress.
kidding.
Menopause is bad enough, thank you. Because I'm just thinking, like, if I don't think it's necessary to have the ability to record in the metaverse, because
Right.
you're already in a tech space where whoever owns that content can make a copy and make it available to you as a
Right.
stream or whatever. Because otherwise, I think we run back into that same issue of, okay, people are recording. What are they doing with it?
Yeah.
Is there some sort of code attached to people
Right.
making recordings, and then you can find what happened to it, kind of like ISRC codes,
Mm-hmm.
on recordings. So
Right.
I think it's a cool thing,
Yeah.
especially because I'm seeing Meta change up their approach, and
Mm-hmm.
now their commercials are saying, look, you can use the metaverse for education, which
Yes.
I think is really cool.
Yeah.
But from a business perspective, I'm like, okay, how
Mm-hmm.
does this work for my product or service? But to your
Yeah.
point, you said there's a physical space in the real world, not in Bizarro world.
Right.
I swear they should have just called the metaverse Bizarro world. It
Bizarro
would
Yeah,
make
world.
so
Yes.
bizarre.
much more sense.
Yeah. There's largely counterparts for everything, and there are so many cool things that are happening in that space, and just stuff that clients are working on that they've been able to build that are either education based and making a greater profile for either horrible tragedies that are spun into
Mhm.
something beautiful and meditative, to opportunities to allow blind people. There was a project with blind burners that I was really excited about, where they were partially sighted or no sighted people that wanted to build something in the metaverse for people that were visually impaired, and my clients partnered with them in creating something really cool, so that all of the other senses are manifest in that space, and they could really enjoy and explore that. So exploring accessibility in that space, all of these things.
Mhm.
There's so much happening that's exciting that we don't always hear about. Um, but yeah, it does require innovation and people that are interested in, not just creating something cool, but how do we create something cool while protecting people's privacy interests, while,
Mhm.
guarding against certain things. It's funny, alt space, you could build kind of a wall, like you could build a bubble around yourself so that people couldn't get in your space, because people would just like climb into you almost, like there were strange things where if you had somebody that was a little stalkery, you could block them. So they had these weird built-in protections that were kind of nice, because
Yeah.
if you have a platform where it's open to 13 and older and everybody can join, you're going to have some shenanigans that you don't enjoy or appreciate. And so, I think that the people that are creating these spaces, creating these things are trying to give good thought, not only to let's build something cool, but how do we also tie in protections that we would want and expect in the real world?
If somebody steals, like, let's say I write a song and I release it and somebody steals it and uses it in the metaverse. Well, the metaverse and blockchain is highly anonymized and super secure. How would I go about issuing like a DMCA or takedown? Or if I don't know who that person is, how do you find these people in the metaverse?
So if let's just stick with the metaverse. It's a little easier, but if you know that a song was used on a platform, then you would reach out to that platform and say, "Hey, I have information that my song was used at this time and this place." I mean, it probably was streaming live where you can't necessarily get it back, but you might be able to, get information about that, or I need to reach out to whoever did it, but takes some digging. It's not a button click like the YouTube takedown notice process or some of the other mechanisms have been built under the DMCA. But we definitely had a DMCA takedown provision because we had to. We had people that were building third-party generated, user-generated content, and it can be dangerous. And so you have to have those protections built in. And I would say most of what I'm seeing in the metaverse, they're still building those same protections and relying on the DMCA if other people are generating content. So, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it's not always as easy to find as what we're used to, but it's there. Sometimes you have to look at terms of use, and they'll be like, "Oh, right to this person," and so we do need to make that a little easier for people.
And is this something that, for an independent musician, if they find their music being used, is this something that they can kind of initiate themselves and say, "Hey, you're using my music, please take it down," or do you recommend they find an attorney to write up a formal DMC takedown?
That's a depends for me, and I say
Okay.
that because who is infringing? If it's a huge artist that has a lot of money, and you have gone through the bother of registering your copyrighted works with the Copyright Office so that you have that protection in place, you might be able to find an attorney that's willing to take that on for you because they know they can get attorney's fees back at the end of the day if you already protected your song at the right time frame, and did it early. So, if you can find that, sometimes you can work that out easily. If there's somebody with no money and they're infringing on your work, you can't get blood from a turnip. The takedown method is a great way to get people to stop using it. But it can be a bit of a whack-a-mole situation where you have to continuously monitor and make sure that people aren't continuing to do that. So if it continues to happen after the takedown notices, sometimes you do need to have an attorney step in and say, "Hey, you can't do this, and continuing to violate this is exposing you to all of these damages under the Copyright Act, so knock it off." Some people don't know. I mean, as ridiculous as that sounds, some people honestly don't know or understand any of this. And so not everybody listens to these podcasts or takes the deep dive, and they don't even understand what IP is or what a copyright is, or why you would need to protect something. And people are putting stuff up on YouTube all the time or any other platform and thinking, "Oh, that was just a cool song I like."
One thing I hear very frequently by people, I saw this on just some YouTuber that had no interest in music. They were just like a lifestyle YouTuber, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I use this song. I can use it only if it's under 10 seconds. I can use this song." It's
Oh, I
like
know.
I had to jump in, and they're like, "No, you actually can't do that." And I
Yeah.
cited a few pieces, and they're like, "Oh yeah, well this is just what I've heard." And I'm like, "No, I'm telling you, you can't do this."
People
Welcome to
can
my
hear
world.
bad advice from a lot of places on the internet.
Where
Going
are you
back
getting
to the
with like?
risks of
It's just
AI, there's good and bad advice out there. And yeah, people are a bit tone deaf and they hear what they want to hear. Yeah, I did an article for Independence on fair use once. And yeah, I was like, there's no 3-second rule in eating or in fair use. Like there's,
No.
It really has to do with the content. And I can't remember the article in detail at this point, but I took an example and I did a very deep dive exploration of fair use from both perspectives to show, if you have a very good attorney on either side, you're in it for the long haul, because fair use is a bit loaded, and there's a weighing, there's a balancing of a lot of different factors, and it can go either way. So fair use, I always remind people, is a defense to a copyright infringement action. It's not something to hang your hat on to infringe works, because you're still going to have to defend yourself, and it's not going to be cheap, and nobody's doing it pro bono for their attorney's fees on the defense side. That's not really a thing, not for that.
Our good friend Davey, she's kind of our resident entertainment attorney on the show here, and she has so many good analogies on intellectual property, and I'm sure you do too. She always puts in perspective when she's speaking with musicians. Think of your song as your car. You can't just take somebody's car and then drive for Uber. That's stealing. It's the same thing. It's like if you use a sample, you can't take somebody's car, change the wheels, paint it, change a steering wheel. That's still not your car. No matter how you dress it up, it's not your car. You still have to have permission to do that. And I'm like, I use that example all the time because it's something that everybody, it's like, you can't just steal somebody's car.
It seems very logical, but for some reason that logic doesn't always carry over when you're talking about creative works. And it's the same. It's theft.
It's because of the accessibility. I think that's kind of what I've deducted from all of this, is that because they can, because I can download an image off the internet, and because I can screenshot something and just upload it, then it's okay. It's not because to them, okay, obviously I can't take somebody's car, and obviously I can't just walk out of the store without paying. Duh. But when it's the internet, it's like it's a whole different thought process, and it's because of the accessibility. That's just my opinion.
I tend to agree with that.
Before we let you go, though, Christianne, I would ask you one last question.
Okay.
In dealing with all of this, and in your efforts to further expand your knowledge in these new fandangled technology spaces, that's my old lady word. Have you personally dived yourself into the metaverse? Have you put on some AR or Oculus glasses and gone, oh God, this is going to be a problem?
Yes. So the Burning Man situation that happened I think they reached out in April or May of 2020 when the event was definitely shutting down. They're like, we need help. So that was one of my first business purchases when I started my own law firm, was an Oculus. And I spent about 20 minutes building a cute little avatar. I have pictures of her, and I went in and I talked to some dude that I wasn't trying to meet there, for a little bit, and I'm like, oh, cool, I'm just making some clients, and then they found me and saved me.
Oh no!
And they taught me how to fly. And we flew up to the top of the man, and they had a little box of fireworks for me. And we were shooting fireworks off the man for a little bit and then flying around. And then we started portaling into different worlds. And there was like a unicorn bus that ran us over at one point. And I'm like, oh, this is great. I don't even have to write any assumption of risk or waiver kind of things for this. We can fly. We can do so much in this space.
Don't have to worry about broken limbs.
And I mean, I definitely would spot things, in the first year we were, even though the DMC doesn't require you to self-monitor, we were monitoring things. So we're like, oh, somebody built a McDonald's in their world, we got to take that down, just stupid things, but let's just err on the side of caution. But it was a hoot. And we went and we'd have cocktail parties, and you could click on signs that would, acknowledge your understanding that alcohol should be, conservatively drank if it's drank, and that, you're understanding the risks. If you clicked on that sign and you overdrank, then your avatar would vomit. So they built all these funny things into the space.
They're
But is
literally
that
turning into like
necessary?
real
I
life.
mean, you're not
No,
drinking real
it was all
alcohol.
for fun. It was all for
Okay,
fun.
I'm like, come on.
We went roller skating with tutus. I mean, but remember what time this is. This is a time where we couldn't see anybody, and we were lonely. And I was having the time of my life with these frickin' avatar buddies that, I've been close to my entire life. So we were all seeing each other pretty regularly throughout the pandemic through these avatars, and it was kind of a life save. The other thing that that really got me through the pandemic in a large way in the Oculus was it was an app called Trip, which is just a meditation app. But you'd get so sick of your space, like you just couldn't look at your four walls anymore. And I could put that on, and I would be like in this open universe of water and sky and stars, and it had this very expansive quality that was very lovely, and you could just kind of reset. So yeah, for me, I absolutely dove in myself, and coming from an artist background, I'm not one of those people that writes contracts like, this is where the phrase goes. I like to get my hands dirty.
Very cool.
Yeah, I guess people were just in April 2020, we were just yearning and missing watching people vomit from alcohol poisoning at shows. So we had to build it into the metaverse.
That one was a weird one, but it was
hilarious.
I kind of view it as Tesla and Elon Musk. Like, Tesla has their cars, they're able to fart. Why? Because they can. Like, I can fart remotely.
Why did I not know that about Tesla?
Yeah, it's like they have speakers, like outside speakers on them that are for the pedestrian warning system, where they have to hum to warn people. So they took it a step further and were like, oh, well, I can talk through it, and it turns my voice into Darth Vader, like remotely from my phone. I can make it fart. So it's like, why not? Like, it's not harming anybody. Why not?
Why not? I mean, that's the exciting thing working with creative people is you build silly stuff, and it can be really cool to explore.
And this is why I'm certain aliens are not here. Because they're like, what is wrong with these people?
They're like, they were almost there. We almost went down to the metaverse, but I don't want that vomiting avatar.
What about copyright law on an alien planet? How does that work?
Interesting. Well,
throughout the universe.
We do have throughout the universe, so I guess we're sort of covered.
That's true. Well, I don't have
favorite.
Yep.
That's true. I don't have any other questions. We've been chatting for an hour. I could chat for the rest of the afternoon. This is so much fun.
Thank you so much. This was a blast.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you. Yes, of course. Thank you so much for being here. Monique, do you have any closing words?
My closing words are: remember to hit subscribe and tell your friends to follow. And don't forget to check down below for all the information that you may need for finding Christianne or anything else that you need to know about the topics that we talked about today. Thank you guys so much for checking out another episode of the Vana Room podcast. We'll see you next month. Thank you so much.